Morning. Thank you for coming. Sometimes you catch a break. About 30 years ago, before my last year of school, I needed a summer job and it fell through. I ended up having to go to Boston in April, 2 months before the summer. Somehow I got job interviews at Parker Brothers, the legendary company that makes Monopoly, and a little startup company that only had 25 people in it called Spinnaker Software. Got interviews at both places, finished the interview. Unbelievably, I got a job offer at both. I had one day to decide where I should go to work. And I honestly have no recollection whatsoever how I made the decision. All I know is that 6 weeks later, I ended up in a little cubicle at Spinnaker Software, a tiny company no one had ever heard of. I walk in the first day. President of the company comes out of his office, walks over. He's from Atlanta, big southern accent, shakes my hand, gives me a hug, welcomes me, goes back to his office, slams the door, picks up the phone, calls the chairman of the company whose office is right next door and says, "Who the hell is that out there?" Because they had forgotten to tell my boss that they had hired me. An hour later, we go to the ad agency, the big fancy ad agency, for the presentation of the first ads this software company is going to run. And the ads have a mom and a dad, and they're going to have a kid in them, showing the kid playing the educational software. And the big question was, should the kid be a boy or a girl? And there's like 8 people around the table, and they all turn to me, the 23-year-old summer intern, and they say, "What do you think, Seth?" And in that moment, I realized that my job, from then on, whatever I did, was going to be making decisions. But I had no clue how to make a decision, so I said, I don't know, can't we get a boy who looks like a girl or a girl who looks like a boy to be in that picture? That didn't work so well. 2 weeks later, Parker Brothers shut down the division that I was going to be hired for, and they fired every single person that they had hired. So I got a break. What I want to talk to you about today is this act of making a decision. A whole bunch of decisions I think you're going to need to make. I want to make you really uncomfortable about what those decisions are because you've been putting some of them off. So let me just dive right in. The first one is this notion of looking at the world and either seeing what is or seeing what you're hoping for. And our temptation is to see what we're hoping for. I'll just pick an industry as an example. For 15 years, the people in the newspaper business should have been seeing the writing on the wall, right? That the chances that 10 years from now, we're going to chop down a lot of trees and drive a truck to your house and drop off something for you to read, even if you're not home, because you paid for it months ago, and then have you read it for 15 minutes and recycle it, are zero. That what the newspaper industry saw is that Craigslist eviscerated the revenue they made from classified ads. They saw that people are getting information from all sorts of places. And what almost everyone in the newspaper business has done is said, we don't like that future. We're hoping for a future that's a lot like the past, so we're going to ignore it. And when you make a decision like that, you make it at your peril. So soon after I was at Spinnaker, where the company went through tens of millions of dollars in venture money, running all sorts of ads. Advertisers would take us to the US Open and we'd buy magazine ads. We were about to go on TV. I realized that our society has shifted and that every company needed to make a decision if it wanted to grow. Either they were going to spam the world and yell at them and run promotions and send email or flyers or FedExes or faxes or salespeople, pick me, yelling at everyone to get some attention. Or you were going to choose to build a business based on permission, talking to people with a voice that's anticipated, personal, and relevant, delivering messages to your customers and your prospects that they actually want to get. And it's a fork in the road. You're going to do one or the other as you grow your company. Either you're the real estate broker with your clever little picture on your business card, sticking it under every windshield that you can find, or you're the marketer who is showing up when they're welcome. A simple way to remember this is this. There are two ways to get married. The first way to get married is to go to a singles bar, walk up to the first person you meet and propose marriage. If that person won't marry you, repeat it on every person in the singles bar until someone says, I do. That's a dumb way to get married. The other way to get married is to go on a date. If it goes well, go on another date with that person. Right? Wait till the third date before you tell them you're out on parole. And then you meet their parents, they meet your parents, you get engaged, you get married. Right? It worked for me, maybe it worked for you. So why aren't you dating your prospects? Why are you running around yelling at everybody instead of figuring out how to earn the right to whisper to them? The third decision that you've got to make is this idea of, are you invisible or are you remarkable? That we grew up in a culture, the Mad Men culture, this culture of yelling at the masses. And this notion of making average stuff for average people is built into almost every one of your organizations. That there's huge pressure to aim it at the middle, to make it good enough without defect, average stuff for average people. And what we found in just the last few years is it doesn't work anymore. That yelling at people doesn't work, interrupting doesn't work, average doesn't work, because it's boring. So let me tell you a story about a couple entrepreneurs in Mamaroneck, New York. 8 years ago, they decided to go into the sock business. Well, the way almost everyone in the sock business makes money from socks is simple. They make average socks for average feet and sell them as cheap as they can. If you can get them into Walmart, good for you. These guys didn't do that. They said, you know what? There's a whole bunch of 12-year-old girls in the world with a fashion problem. Their problem is they don't have enough to talk about at recess. Their mom can't possibly buy them a new outfit every day. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to make socks for 12-year-old girls. Socks that don't match. 3 socks to a container, not 2, 3, for $10. What good is that? I'll tell you what good it is. A 12-year-old girl can go to school and say to her friends, want to see my socks? Right? I don't know if you can see that. Oh, there we go. Right? Want to see my socks? Want to see my socks is their entire marketing strategy. Because then the other 12-year-old girl goes home and says to her mom, I need new socks. And so the idea spreads. Now, it's easy to laugh at Little Mismatch, but guess what? They did about $1 million in revenue their first year, and last year they did $40 million in sock revenue, with some mittens too, but mostly socks. The point is, they built it into what they did all day. They didn't say, how are we going to come up with a clever promotion? And by the way, we make average socks. They said, our job is to give 12-year-old girls something to talk about. Which leads to this next giant fork in the road that we all face. Are you in the story business or are you in the fact business? Because we've been trained, the engineers who make the stuff in our office have been trained. The RFPs that we get from big companies have trained us. Facts, facts, facts. But we don't buy stuff that way. Think about everything you own that costs more than the cheapest. No one here is wearing the cheapest clothes they could find. Well, maybe that guy, but no one else is wearing the cheapest clothes they could find. You don't drive the cheapest car made. You don't live in the cheapest available house. How did you decide to spend the extra money? You do it because you tell yourself a story. We all tell ourselves stories. And those stories are based on our worldview, on the biases and expectations we have before we even encounter the item we're talking about. 2 people can watch a presidential debate, and one of them will come up with exactly the wrong opinion based on what they just saw, according to the first one. And that's not because of what happened on screen. It's because of what we had in our head before we got there. A peasant in India has a totally different mindset than someone in Tuscaloosa, than someone in California, than someone in Europe. Always shifting, different ways we tell ourselves stories. I was in Bareilly, India with D-Light last July, helping understand how people buy solar lanterns. Now, if you live in a little village in India, odds are you have no electricity and a kerosene lantern. Kerosene lanterns are stinky, they're expensive, they burn down your house, and they give you lung cancer. A solar lantern eliminates all those problems and pays for itself in 90 days. Those are the facts. And yet, almost no one buys one. How come? I can prove it's better. The facts are on my side. It doesn't matter. What matters is the story. The story you tell to the people you tell it to. It better be true, but it also better resonate with me. The next decision I want to talk about has to do with this. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these. This is a record album. And for a long time, for 30 or 40 years, the music business, the music industry was perfect. I'll tell you why it was perfect. Just a few of the reasons it was perfect. If you got an album and you liked it, you played it a lot. If you played it a lot, you wore it out and you had to buy another one. If you got an album and you liked it and you loaned it to a friend, you didn't have to have it anymore, so you had to buy another one. If a new act came out, you heard about it on the radio, which is government spectrum, belongs to all of us, that was given by Herbert Hoover to a bunch of entrepreneurs in the 20s, who then use it to help sell music. And if you decide to go buy music that you heard on the radio for free, then you go to a record store, I don't know if you remember those, and the record store would have row after row after row of stuff in beautiful packages just ready for you to buy. And there was the senior prom, and there was MTV, and there was Rolling Stone, all of these things in place. And then they invented the CD, and they tripled their revenue. But they opened the door to digital. And then digital comes along, and now I can listen to any song in the world for free on YouTube with 2 clicks. And now, more people are listening to more music by more musicians than ever before. And what did the music industry do? They sued their biggest customers. That's a strategy. And then they whine a lot. That's a strategy. Either your business, which is going to be different 5 years from now, I guarantee it, I don't care what you make, even if you're in the funeral business, it's going to change. Either you defend the status quo or you invent the future. Those are the only 2 choices. And too often, because we're factory focused, because we're focused on doing our job, because we're focused on sticking it out and being grateful we have a job and making it to retirement, we forget that the future doesn't care whether or not you believe in it. Right? That what the future is doing is it's coming. And either you're the one who's leading it or you're not. Google and Yahoo. People laughed at Google, they laughed at Google, they laughed at Google, and then one day they were buying the stock. Because for years and years, folks like Yahoo said, we don't want the future to come. We're really happy with where we are. And then a little startup company came along and changed those rules. One of the things you're going to have to do in order to invent the future is to get rid of your hammer. Because if all you've got is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And if you walk around looking at the future and say, how does this help my real estate business? How does this help my insurance business? How does this help my hospital crib business? And all of it is about how does this help what I have right now, you're going to completely misjudge the future. On my desk, right behind where I sit, is a beautiful green wicker basket with a top. And inside that basket is a t-shirt that cost me more than $40 billion. Back in 1991, 92, I was a book packager. I invented ideas for books. I knew how to make books. I was also writing articles for magazines about this new thing they had called the internet. I had a high-speed connection in my office. I had computers. If anyone was seeing what the internet was becoming, I was one of those people. So I saw all this content online. I said, I know. I'll write a book about it. So I found a publisher who put up $70,000, which enabled me to hire enough people so I could break even on the project. And we researched for a year a book called Best in the Net. And then what we did was we brought it to the publisher, who printed 50,000 copies, and I made t-shirts for the sales force. It said Best in the Net on them. Well, the book came out and sold about 784 copies. And while I was busy building a book, 2 guys at Stanford University who had exactly the same knowledge as I did and had less money than me built Yahoo, which at one point was worth $80 billion. The difference is they saw the internet and they said, let's build a search engine. I saw the internet and said, I can write a book because that's what I do. Which leads to this discussion which you have at work all the time about thinking inside the box versus thinking outside the box. The problem with thinking inside the box is it's really dark in there, and you have trouble seeing what to do next. And the problem with thinking outside the box is there's nothing to lean against. It's a vacuum, nothing to lever against. You're in space. It's at the edge of the box where the magic happens, where the innovation happens. Poking the edge of the box, finding out what you can lean against, that's what you need to do. And you're not going to be able to do that and getting a standing ovation every time, because the people around you are scared, because the people around you are nervous. And when they see you going to the edge of the box, they're like, oh, don't go over there. Something bad happened to Billy 4 years ago when he went over there. Which is exactly why you need to go over there, because that's where all the action is. And so now we got to talk about Henry Ford and the biggest decision of all. Henry Ford was the most important person of the 20th century, by far. Henry Ford figured out and perfected mass production, interchangeable parts. At one point, the Ford Motor Company was so good at making cars that they made an offer to the machinists and workers of Detroit. They said, if you're a 50-cent a day man, if you're making 50 cents a day running a machine, come work for me, I will pay you $5 a day. And he wasn't being just generous. He was making so much money with that productivity leap that interchangeable parts produced that he could easily afford to do it. He was so efficient that the Ford Motor Company employed Ford shepherds who raised Ford sheep so they could get Ford wool, so they could weave it into Ford fabric and put it on the seats of the Ford car. You may not know why Henry Ford said you can have it in any color you want as long as it's black. It's not because Henry Ford liked black cars. It's because black paint dries 4 hours faster than any other color. And so he could get the cars out there faster, the assembly line faster. Keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving. And you know what interchangeable parts brings us? Interchangeable people. And this is the discussion of our time. Interchangeable people makes a lot of sense if you're running a factory. Someone calls in sick, you don't want to shut down the whole place. You just put someone else on the line. Interchangeable people means, oh, I got a whole big stack of resumes here. Who should we hire next? Interchangeable people means, oh, you want to raise, you're fired. I'll get somebody else. Interchangeable people is what we all grew up with. And now it's not working so well. And it's not working so well for a bunch of reasons, but the biggest reason is this. Interchangeable people are really good at running a factory that makes average stuff for average people. But if you want to make something remarkable, if you want to make something worth talking about, if you want to have an organization that connects with people in an anticipated, personal, and relevant way, you can't have interchangeable people doing what they're told, because that's not smart enough. And you're going to be destroyed by the organizations that are filled with irreplaceable people who you're counting on to do work you couldn't even imagine. This notion of choosing to be irreplaceable is frightening, because it means you are dependent on the people who work for you, because it means you have to go out on a limb every single day in what you do and how you do it. But here's the thing. If you get a job where they hire you because your resume is just like everybody else's but on nicer paper, and where they tell you what to do all day, and where you need to do what was done before a little faster and a little cheaper, then don't be surprised when the boss treats you like you're interchangeable. But if you want to be the organization you'd like to buy from, if you want to be the organization you'd like to work at, you need to embrace the fact that the only way you're going to be able to pull that off is by doing something differently. It's the distinction between long work and hard work. Long work means showing up a lot of hours, grinding it out, doing what you're told, increasing your productivity by showing up more. This is the law firm model. Hard work means going out on a limb, bringing innovation or joy or connection to what you do. Hard work is scary, not because it takes a lot of time, but because it takes a lot of guts. You know, there's so many people out there who are busy all day polishing, checking their BlackBerry, checking their email, checking to make sure everything's okay, checking in. When was the last time you checked your Twitter feed? Checking in. Is everything okay? Is everything okay? All this polishing, all this getting your ducks in a row, right? Once I get all my ducks in a row, once I put out that fire and that fire and that fire, then I'll be ready to do something interesting. You know, the problem is not getting your ducks in a row. The problem is what you're going to do with that duck once it's in a row. The challenge is not that we need more compliance. The problem is we need better decisions. We need more action. We need individuals in our organization who are going to lead as opposed to manage. Did you notice they didn't call this ManageCast? What's the difference other than a syllable? I'll tell you what the difference is. Management is what you do when you want your employees to do something you already know what it looks like. Management is getting them to do what they did yesterday, but faster and cheaper. Management is making sure there are no fires. Leadership is a totally different skill. Leadership means hiring great people who you trust, getting everyone aligned, giving them a platform, and then getting out of the way. That leadership involves being surprised by the people who work for you because they go farther than you ever could have expected, because they are raising the bar and taking you somewhere that you all want to go. Most of us are afraid to lead because it means giving up control. And most people look for a manager. They don't look for a leader because it means taking responsibility. And so the next decision, are you in the business of complying or do you want to own things? That this notion of compliance is what most people think of at work. My annual review is coming up. They're going to tell me for 15 minutes what I did all year long in terms of did I comply with directions. And that leads to the mindset of how can I get away with a little more? How can I work a little less? How can I try a little less? How can I steal a few office supplies? It's me against the boss. Obviously, if you're being managed, you're going to live in Dilbert world. But we don't live in Dilbert world anymore. You don't have a job anymore. You have a career. And your career is nothing but a series of projects. They might be projects at the same company, but welcome to project world. Your reputation is no longer your resume. It's the projects you've done and what the world says about them. So in that world, isn't your entire goal to do more, not see what you can get away with? If it's your project, your reputation, the question is, how can I do more for this project? How can I put more into this project? Because if they will let me, if they will give me the platform to put more into the project, then we both benefit because they are leading me someplace that makes sense to go. I'm almost done with all these choices. I hope I'm not freaking you out too badly. The next one is this difference between scarcity and abundance. Most of the businesses we work in are based on scarcity. Let me talk about books for a minute, one I'm familiar with. Books are based on scarce paper, scarce editors, scarce number of authors, scarce shelf space at the store. That the publisher wins when they use all that scarcity to their advantage. And then something like the Kindle comes along. You can make a book on the Kindle for a nickel or less. Where's the scarcity in that? That what used to be scarce is now abundant. That we can deliver all sorts of things that used to be impossible to buy at any price 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So what's scarce now? What's scarce now is your attention. What's scarce now is your trust. That organizations that embrace attention and trust end up doing far better than those who try to hold something scarce and keep it rare. At Zappos, Tony Hsieh understood that if someone calls his customer service number and is willing to give their undivided attention by talking on the phone, that's the greatest marketing opportunity of all time. So unlike almost every other company where there's a stopwatch where the customer service people are trying to get you off the phone, at Zappos they try to keep you on the phone. That no customer service rep at Zappos is ever criticized for staying on the phone even for an hour with a customer. And that one decision allowed Tony Hsieh to build a shoe store that he could then sell for $900 million. Understanding the difference between scarcity and abundance. Then we got to think about, are you normal? Are you going for the middle? Or is your organization all about the edges, the weird, the people on the fringes, the people who spend all their time on Twitter or get a lot of plastic surgery or travel on safari 7 weeks a year or live in airport after airport? They're all on the edges. Does your institution say he can't be a man because he doesn't smoke the same cigarettes as me? Is this all about pushing people to be in the middle? Or is it about embracing the weird? Because guess what? We are way weirder than we ever were before. That what the internet is letting us do is find people, wherever they are in the world, who share our interests. Speaking of that, to interrupt myself, today's Rob Clark's birthday. I just want to say happy birthday to you. Rob lives in some other country, but I know him because he's weird like me, and we're interested in the same things, and we can connect. This notion that there's other people out there who are focused on the same things you're focused on is huge. And yet, you're going to go back to work tomorrow, back to normal, back to how do we make average stuff for average people? How do we yell about it? And that's not where the future lies. The future lies in a very different direction. Basically, it comes down to this. You're either an accountant doing it again and again, or you're an artist. An artist is a human being solving a problem in a way that's never been solved before. The first person to paint water lilies or the Mona Lisa was an artist. The person in Dothan, China, who sits there copying it day after day after day for $1 an hour is a painter. Artists are human beings who use their platform and their training and their skill to do work that's worth doing, to connect people, to make an impact on the world. That what artists do is they have difficult discussions. They push our buttons. They take us to a place we haven't been before. What you're going to have to wrestle with is this. Do you have the authority to do any of these things? No. If you take the responsibility for what happens, will they let you? Yes. That your job in your organization now is to start taking responsibility, stepping up and understanding that your role is to be indispensable, that your role is to lead a group of irreplaceable people who are doing work that matters, who are touching people. That the problem with fitting in is once you fit in all the way, where do you go? There's nowhere left. That the opportunity is to stand out. And now for the first time ever, it is easier to stand out. It is easier to do work that matters, to make connections, to make promises, and to keep them. That the opportunity for you, they didn't build the internet so that you could watch all the Justin Bieber videos you wanted. That's not what it's for, right? The internet is a connection machine. It's a machine that at low cost lets you share ideas worth spreading. And it has upended almost every industry we know of, including yours. And what it's doing for you right here, right now, is making the final choice for you, which is this. Are you going to race to the top, or are you going to continue in the race to the bottom? The race to the bottom means how can I be a little cheaper? How can I get another 6 inches of shelf space at Walmart? The race to the bottom is how can we get more people to work cheaper for us? How can we lower our cost of goods? How can we get more and more compliance? And I'm saying to you, the problem with the race to the bottom is simple. You might win. The alternative is the race to the top. To understand that the asset of your company and of your career is, will they miss you when you're gone? Will they miss you if you're not there? If you don't show up with that email next week, will people say, I wonder where it is? Right? That what you have the opportunity to do now is to touch people. To do something that frightens you, to challenge the resistance, to look yourself in the mirror and say, I can't believe I have this opportunity. I can't believe I have this platform. I can't believe I have this project. And to do something with it that no one else is willing to do art. I bet you can do just that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.